Hey guys, Brad Costello here. I've gotten kind of a reputation in some of our bonus footage for being a bit of an EDH bully, and I can't really deny it. I am an aggressive EDH player, and it is my favorite format. We've had a bunch of people asking about my decks and the process I use in building them, so thought I'd take a few minutes here, walk you through a couple of my decks, tell you the processes and ideas that I use when building EDH decks, and kind of help you on your way to becoming something of an EDH bully yourself, or at least enjoying this great format. Now, before we jump into that, I want to give a huge shout out to our friends and sponsor, Ultra Pro. Without them, this episode would not be possible. A lot of people have actually commented on my very cool Unhinged Forest playmat, which is from Ultra Pro. Unfortunately, that's not available anymore, but you can still get the matching sleeves, which I like a lot, at your local game store or online. Anyhow, to jump into it, the most important deck to me, or my favorite deck, is my Selvala Heart of the Wilds deck. You've seen me use it a couple times to beat my co-stars and our director, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Now, this deck is not friendly. This deck is not casual. This deck is tuned for competitive EDH. The next deck I'm going to show you is more casual, so if you're looking to keep your friends and have them be willing to continue to play with you in a casual format, this is not the deck to emulate, but as people have been asking, we're going to give you, the basics of how to make a deck like this work. The Commander Selvala is the engine that the deck runs through. When you cast creatures, if she's in play, if it's the most powerful creature on the board, you get to draw a card when you cast it. That affects everyone. But for me, the important thing is her mana ability. A green and tap her to add X mana in any combination of colors. In this deck, it's only green because it's EDH. But X mana of any colors, where X is the power of my strongest creature. Now, as far as my mana base is concerned, it's pretty straightforward. 31 to 32 forests. Right now I have 32 in it, but I do consider EDH decks to be kind of a living, breathing thing on their own. I'm always making changes and tweaks, so it's very possible that this will go back to 32 or even 31 basic lands. The two lands I run that are not basic are Wirewood Lodge, which allow me to untap an elf, and Gaia's Cradle, which is an expensive card that you're not going to run in casual formats, but it taps for 1 green for every creature I control, which is huge. The point of this deck, the way it's built right now, is basically like Green Storm, wherein I want to draw and cast potentially my entire deck on turn 3 or turn 4. But instead of winning with a storm card like Tendrils of Agony, I'm going to win by dealing lethal damage. So it's kind of a storm, stompy, aggro green deck. It's everything that green wants to be. Now, this deck runs all the cards that you're used to seeing in a green EDH deck. All the main mana dorks are there. Priest of Titania and Llanowar Elves. Sol Ring is there. In my opinion, it goes in every EDH deck, period. I've heard some people argue with me, but I don't care. There is really no more efficient mana option in EDH as the Power 9 or ban. But Sol Ring is just as powerful. It's Power 10. You run it everywhere. Now, as we go through this, we're going to see that there are a lot of cards that are just kind of staples in EDH. All right, I'm running a Chroma's Memorial. I'm running Duplicant, Eternal Witness, Reclamation Sage. Of course, it's a must in any green deck. Reclamation Sage is less than $1. If you're running green, you have to include it. I'm running some newer cards. I have Rhonas the Indomitable in the deck. I'm thinking about adding Majestic Myarch, the new card from Hour of Devastation. That's power and toughness is equal to twice the number of creatures I control. Of course, lots of mana dorks. I have a bunch of spells in this deck that allow me to sacrifice a creature to draw cards equal to its power. Because again, the point is, keep refilling my hand, keep storming out, keep casting everything. So cards like Life's Legacy, 1 in a green, sacrifice a creature as part of the casting cost, draw cards equal to its power. I also have some typical spells that you're going to see in every green EDH deck. Green Sun Zenith, Tooth and Nail, Nature's Claim, Krosan Grip, Fade to Antiquity. There's so many artifacts and enchantments run in EDH. Even if it's just mana dorks, you want to run them. They're not expensive cards. They go everywhere. Beast Within, Song of the Dryads also, they deal with problems, especially Song of the Dryads. If your opponent has an indestructible creature, or they have their commander, great. Song of the Dryads. Now your commander's a forest. Have fun with that. Without a disenchant, you don't have access to your commander. We are putting the full deck list up so you'll be able to see that. Now, a couple of the key cards. We have my infinite combination pieces. Umbra Mantle with Selvala. As long as she's generating more than 5 mana a turn, Umbra Mantle lets me untap her for 3, so I can just keep retapping and reactivating Selvala. So if I have a creature with 5 power and Umbra Mantle's on Selvala, I have infinite mana. If I have Staff of Domination, basically the same thing. I can pay 3 to untap her, pay 1 to untap the staff. So I need a creature with power and toughness of 6 to go infinite. Staff of Domination, though, allows me to draw my entire deck. So Umbra Mantle, just mana. Staff of Domination, I draw my whole deck, I play my whole deck. Basically the way that I ended up winning the bonus content video against Austin and John, I think after episode 4. Now, I do have some creatures in here that are strictly here to make Selvala tap for a lot of mana early. Phyrexian Soulgorger is an 8/8 creature for 3. The drawback is huge. The drawback is cumulative. Sacrifice a creature during your upkeep. So turn 1, sack 1 creature. Turn 2, sack 2 creatures. This is not meant to last on the battlefield. It's meant to cast and immediately tap Selvala for 8. If I do survive another turn, odds are the Soulgorger may be the card I'm sacking for its upkeep. The other one is Phyrexian Dreadnought. It's a 12/12 trampler for 1 out of Mirage. Now, Phyrexian Dreadnought has a huge drawback. When it comes into play, I have to sacrifice creatures with power 12 or greater combined, or I have to sacrifice the Dreadnought. But in response to the sack trigger, I can activate Selvala. So for 1 colorless and 1 green, I get a dozen green mana to use. So those are the kind of cards that are the engines of the deck. They just keep everything rolling. Now we do have our little combination here. We have Temur Sabertooth, which allows me to return a creature to my hand for 1 and a green. And we have Great Oak Guardian, which for 5 and a green, it's a flash creature with reach that says whenever it comes into play, target player's creatures get +2/+2 until end of turn. So if I'm generating enough mana, or infinite mana, then I just keep bouncing Great Oak Guardian back to my hand. Everything I have gets +2/+2 every time I recast it. So I do it 100 times, everything's +200/+200. We have Genesis Wave. With infinite mana, it's literally just play my entire deck, swing out for lethal. Walking Ballista is an instant win that's actually used in Vintage and Legacy these days, but we're using it here in EDH. If I'm making infinite mana, that's just instant infinite damage. I cast Ballista, he gets X 1/1 counters, where X is half the mana I spent to cast him, and then I remove a counter to deal a damage. Craterhoof Behemoth is a no-brainer in any green deck. EDH, that is, any green creature deck. All my creatures get +X and trample, where X is the number of creatures. That's just a win con. Protean Hulk is a 6/6 for 5 and 2 green. That when it goes to the graveyard, I get to go through my deck and put every creature with a CMC of 6 or lower into play. So that in a build like this is pretty much instant win. And Omnath, Locus of Mana, because the more mana I make, the bigger he gets, or she gets, or it gets. I don't know that it's got a gender. The bigger it gets, and the bigger it gets, the more mana Selvala taps for. Now, I have 2 cards in here that certainly one of them should be in every green EDH deck you run. And they're cards that protect my chain when I'm trying to win on that turn. I have Autumn's Veil. For 1 green, it says, my spells can't be countered this turn by blue or black spells. So it just stops counterspell players, or hopefully draws out the counterspell before I start my chain. The other one is Heroic Intervention. This should be in your green EDH decks. It's 1 and a green, instant speed, all of my creatures gain hexproof and indestructible. So very simply, if you're trying to get rid of Selvala in the middle of my chaining out, if you're trying to get rid of the big creature that I'm using to generate mana, I just give all my stuff hexproof and indestructible, and then there's nothing you can really do. So, as I said, this is not a fun deck to play against. This is not a friendly deck. What I want in my opening hand is I want a piece that allows me to draw a lot of cards, or one of my infinite combo pieces. I want one of the big creatures with a low CMC, like Phyrexian Dreadnought, to start the whole chain off. And then I want some sort of fast mana for turn 1, like a Llanowar Elves or a Soul Ring, to help me get there. Theoretically, if I can get a Mana Dork or a Soul Ring on turn 1, then on turn 2, I may be able to go infinite and win right there with a perfect draw. That's the goal with Selvala. Now, let's look at a more casual deck that you actually will be able to kind of take pointers from and use my strategies or my philosophies to make your EDH experience a little bit more fun. This deck is the Black Yahenni, the Undying Partisan deck that you saw Casey use, Casey Jackson, he plays Steve. You saw Casey use in one of our games earlier this year. This is a vampire tribal deck. Now, I'm really big on tribal decks because I think that they're fun. And when you stick to a theme to a fault when you're building EDH decks, it stops you from breaking them. I can only make this deck so powerful without deviating from the theme. And in this case, the theme is board wipes and vampires. It's all built around my commander, Yahenni the Undying Partisan, who is a 2/2 creature with haste for 2 and a black. But with Yahenni, whenever one of my opponent's creatures dies, Yahenni gets a +1/+1 counter permanently. And whenever I sacrifice one of my other creatures, Yahenni gets indestructible until end of turn. So as you would imagine, this deck runs a ton of board wipes. It plays into the theme that I tried to build. I can make Yahenni indestructible, so I want to run Damnation. Bantu's Last Reckoning out of Hour of Devastation is a new addition. Just as many ways as possible to keep killing off my opponent's creatures. Grave Pact and Dictative Erebos. Whenever one of my creatures dies, everyone stacks a creature. Well, that couldn't be more thematic to what I'm trying to do. I sack a creature to make my commander indestructible. Everyone sacrifices their creatures. Yahenni gets counters. Now, one of the big issues with running mono black, and really any mono color, is you're going to have certain types of spells, certain types of cards that are difficult to deal with. In mono black, it's artifacts and enchantments. There's very limited opportunity to get rid of an enchantment or an artifact that just shuts down what you're trying to do. All right, the best card that I use to deal with those, and my favorite, is Scour from Existence. It's a 7-drop out of Battle for Zendikar that just says exile target permanent. I also run Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. That goes in most of my decks. It's one of my favorite creatures that exiles 2 permanents upon cast. The idea being, I need to be able to get rid of certain things. If my opponent has, an ensnaring bridge in play that's stopping me from being able to attack with my commander, I need a way to get rid of it. Otherwise, I'm literally just waiting for my opponent to win through whatever method their deck is built to do so. The other big thing about black is ramp. Black makes lots of mana. Okay, there's Crypt Ghast in here, which gives you an extra black mana every time you tap a swamp. There is, of course, Cabal Coffers and Urborg. Urborg makes all of my lands swamps, and Cabal Coffers says tap 2 and tap it to make X black mana, where X is equal to the number of swamps you control. Then you run, a few other special lands, and you can run a few other cards. There's Cabal of the Coffers, Magus of the Coffers, which is basically a Cabal Coffers creature. Tap 2, tap it, make X mana. The idea being, I need to be able to cast these expensive creatures because a lot of the powerful black vampires are high in casting costs, 5, 6, 7, even 8 mana. And I need to be able to keep refilling my board because I continually sacrifice. So you're also running Phyrexian Arena. That goes in every black EDH deck. Draw an extra card every upkeep at the cost of 1 life. You start with 40 life. Paying 1 life to get an extra card is a fantastic trade-off. Make sure you always run it. In a deck like this, the plan is very simple. I want ramp early game, I want a couple of small creatures, and I want to get Yahenni out and online. I want to make sure I always have at least one other creature before I cast Yahenni to make it difficult for my opponents to get rid of Yahenni before the deck really gets going. It's an important thing to do, and it sticks with it thematically. And other than that, this is a pretty typical EDH deck for me. The theme in this one, again, Vampire board wipe, because that's the commander. All right, guys, so that's it for today. We looked at Yahenni, we looked at Selvala. As you know, I do have other EDH decks. Feel free to message me with questions about them. Padim, you've seen, Perforos, there's too many to count. Building the Locust God, very excited about that. And we can also talk about decks that I no longer run, like Sharoon, which I had for a while, and Niv Mizzet, which was too mean. Anyhow, listen, as good as I may be at EDH, I am not the definitive expert. If you really want to step up your game, whether it to be competitive or just to get a little further into this format, which is just the most fun you can have at Magic, in my opinion, be sure to check out the Command Zone podcast. The hosts are really knowledgeable. They're super entertaining. They're friends of ours, and we love them, and we definitely think you should check them out, whether you're trying to get better or interested in getting involved in EDH in the first place. Also, if you are new to EDH or you haven't, stuck your toe in the pool yet, you can get pre-constructed EDH decks from Wizards of the Coast. They release new ones every year, and it's a reasonably priced way to just get a deck in a box. You sit down, you start playing, and then over time you tweak the deck to make it your own. And you'll get to see why we're all so fanatical about EDH. Because it's the closest thing to the good old days of kitchen table Magic that you can find now that everything's become aggro stompy, turn 2 win, see who shuffles the best. EDH is the way to go. I really think you'll enjoy it. Certainly let me know in the comments below what your experiences with EDH are. And guys, from all of us here at Manuscript, and of course our very good friends over at Ultra Pro, thanks for checking us out. Be sure to tune in Friday for episode 7 and Thursday for another behind the scenes video. See you next time.